A fictional story. Eleanor Voss and all actors, films, and events described below are invented for this narrative and do not depict real people. For nearly 5 decades, Eleanor Voss was Hollywood's most disciplined diplomat. She never fought in public. She never leaked a grudge to a gossip column. She smiled through award losses, shook hands with directors who'd wronged her, and gave interviews so composed that reporters joked you could set a watch by her poise. In an industry built on scandal, Eleanor Voss was the one constant. Gracious, unreadable, untouchable. Then she turned 76. It happened during what was supposed to be a routine sit-down for a career retrospective documentary. The cameras were already rolling when the interviewer, almost as an afterthought, asked the question every journalist had asked in some form for 40 years and never gotten a real answer to. Was there ever anyone you truly couldn't stand? Eleanor Voss looked at the lens for a long moment. Then she laughed, not her practiced, magazine cover laugh, but something lower and more tired. "You know," she said, "I think I'm finally old enough not to care what any of them think anymore." What followed was 90 minutes of the most unguarded conversation of her career. 6 names. 6 stories. Actors the public had always assumed she adored. Co-stars from her most beloved films. Men and women whose posters hung in film school dorm rooms next to hers. People believed these pairings were magic. Eleanor Voss revealed, one by one, that some of them were closer to war. This is that story. Eleanor Voss has always approached acting like a surgeon approaches an operating table, methodically, silently, with total command of every variable before the first incision. She reads a script a dozen times before she ever says a line aloud. She builds a character from the inside, tracing motivations back to childhood wounds the audience will never see but will somehow feel. That discipline is the whole of her reputation. Marcus Bellamy built his career on the opposite instinct. He was a gifted, restless performer who treated the script as a suggestion and the take as a living thing that should never be repeated the same way twice. Directors loved him because he made scenes feel alive. Actors who worked opposite him either caught fire from his unpredictability or drowned in it. When the two were cast together in a prestige courtroom drama called The Long Verdict, the studio thought they'd found lightning in a bottle, the meticulous veteran against the freewheeling improviser. Instead, the set became a quiet battlefield. Bellamy rewrote lines in his head between takes and delivered whatever came out, forcing Voss to abandon blocking she'd rehearsed for weeks. Crew members remember her jaw tightening every time he changed a beat mid-scene without warning her. She never yelled. She never stormed off. But after one particularly chaotic afternoon, she was overheard telling the script supervisor, "If the truth of a scene depends on nobody knowing what's about to happen, it isn't truth. It's chaos wearing a costume." Bellamy heard about the comment, and rather than take offense, he leaned into it, telling a producer with a grin, "She rehearses the spontaneity right out of a room. I'd rather catch lightning than build a lighthouse." They finished the film. It was, by most accounts, excellent. Nominated for several awards, praised for the electric tension between the two leads, which critics assumed was chemistry. Voss, decades later, called it something else entirely. "We were not creating tension," she said in the documentary. "We were surviving each other. People mistook our incompatibility for artistry, and I let them, because saying otherwise would have hurt the film." They were offered 3 more projects together over the years. She turned down every one without explanation. Bellamy, for his part, has always spoken of her with public admiration, calling her the best scene partner I never understood. Whether that was genuine or a performance of its own, even Voss admits she's never been sure. If Marcus Bellamy taught Eleanor Voss that chaos could pass for chemistry, Teddy Okafor taught her something crueler, that respect for craft could still curdle into resentment when careers begin to diverge. The two met young, cast as star-crossed rivals turned lovers in the independent drama Low Tide, a film that put both of their names on the map. In those early years, they were inseparable, genuine friends, both hungry, both broke, both willing to work 18-hour days for a project they believed in. Voss has said in the past that Okafor was the first co-star who ever made her feel like acting was a conversation rather than a performance. The friendship didn't survive success. Low Tide became a cult hit. Voss's career accelerated almost immediately afterward. Award nominations, studio offers, directors calling her personally. Okafor's did not. He kept working, kept delivering strong performances in smaller films, but the industry simply didn't turn its attention to him the way it turned to her. It's a common and often silent tragedy in Hollywood. Two equally talented people, one path forward, one path stalled. Voss has said she tried, for years, to help, recommending him for roles, mentioning his name to casting directors, even lobbying a studio to cast him alongside her in a film he was eventually passed over for. According to her, that last effort was the breaking point. When he learned she'd advocated for him and he'd still lost the part, he reportedly told a mutual friend, "I don't need Eleanor's charity. I need my own career, not her leftovers." The comment got back to her. She was, by her own account, devastated, not by the anger, but by the implication that her support had been condescension rather than loyalty. They didn't speak for almost a decade. When they finally crossed paths again at an industry tribute, Okafor reportedly greeted her warmly, as though nothing had happened, and Voss played along, because that is what the two of them had always been best at, performing normalcy for a room that was watching. "We loved each other once," she said in the interview. "And then success got between us in a way neither of us knew how to survive. I don't think either of us was wrong. I think we were just two people who wanted the same impossible thing." Some rivalries are loud. The one between Eleanor Voss and Roland Kessler was almost entirely silent, which, according to everyone who worked with both of them, made it far more dangerous. For nearly 15 years, studios tried relentlessly to pair the two together. Kessler was one of the most commercially bankable actors of his generation, a man whose name alone could get a film financed. Voss was, by then, the industry's gold standard for prestige performance. On paper, the combination was a guaranteed award season juggernaut. Every few years, a script would surface that seemed destined to finally bring them together, and every few years, the project would quietly die before cameras rolled. The reason, Voss finally revealed, wasn't scheduling conflicts, as the trade papers always speculated. It was philosophy. Kessler had built his entire public persona around the idea that acting was instinct, not labor. He was famous for a quote that circulated through the industry for years: "Preparation is just fear wearing a briefcase." He said it in interviews, at panels, on late-night television, always to laughter. To most people, it was a charming bit of self-deprecating swagger from a man who didn't need to try hard to be brilliant. To Eleanor Voss, who had spent her entire adult life treating preparation as sacred, the line felt like a direct insult to everything she stood for. She never said so publicly, but according to a longtime casting director who worked with both of them, Voss quietly made it known, project after project, that she wouldn't do a film with him. No explanation was ever given to the studios. There was no confrontation, no headline, no public falling out. Just a closed door, again and again, for over a decade. Kessler, when asked about the pattern years later, seemed genuinely unbothered. "She's brilliant. Genuinely. I think we just see the job differently," he said. "Some people need the map. I like getting lost." It's a generous, almost affectionate quote. And Voss, when told about it during her interview, only smiled and said, "That's the nicest way anyone's ever described refusing to grow up." The two never worked together. Film historians still speculate about what a Voss-Kessler collaboration might have looked like. Voss, for her part, has no regrets. "Some pairings only work in theory," she said. "I'd rather protect the theory than ruin it." Of all 6 names Eleanor Voss finally spoke aloud, none carried more weight, more history, or more visible pain than Victor Amato. The two starred together in Custody, a searing divorce drama that many critics still consider one of the finest films either of them ever made. It won numerous awards. It launched 1,000 film school essays about restrained, devastating performances. And behind the scenes, according to Voss, it was the site of the single worst professional experience of her career. Amato was a devotee of extreme, immersive technique, the kind of actor who believed real emotional risk on set produced performances that couldn't be faked. He'd built a reputation for pushing boundaries in the name of authenticity, and directors tended to indulge him because the results, undeniably, were often extraordinary. During one pivotal scene depicting an argument between their characters, Amato deviated from the blocked, rehearsed choreography without any warning to Voss, her scene partner, or the director. What happened next was not scripted, not rehearsed, and not agreed to. Voss has described it only in the sparest terms in the past. A moment of physical contact she did not consent to and was not prepared for, executed in the name of finding something real. She has never gone into more graphic detail publicly, and this account won't either, but she has been unambiguous about how she experienced it. "That wasn't acting," she said in the documentary, her voice flat and precise in a way that felt more devastating than anger would have. "That was someone deciding my body was raw material for his process. I have never forgiven it, and I never will." The film went on to enormous acclaim. Both of them were nominated for major awards. The public saw electric, award-worthy chemistry. Voss saw something else entirely, a professional triumph built on top of a violation she carried privately for years before ever naming it. Amato, in later interviews, alluded to the incident only obliquely, saying things like, "I know I pushed too hard on that film," and "I've thought about that shoot more than any other in my career." He has never fully apologized on the record. Voss has never worked with him again, and according to people close to her, has quietly ensured she never will. "Professionally, it made both of our careers," she said. "Personally, it cost me something I still don't have back." Not every grudge Eleanor Voss carries came from conflict on a film set. Some, she admitted, came from something far more human and far less flattering: resentment. Isla Marchetti rose to fame quickly in her 20s, the daughter of two well-known industry figures who opened doors for her long before she'd proven she deserved to walk through them. She was talented, nobody denies that, but her ascent was frictionless in a way Voss's own decades-long climb had never been. Voss had clawed her way up through regional theater, forgettable television roles, and years of rejection before anyone in Hollywood took her seriously. Marchetti, by contrast, seemed to step directly into leading roles the way other actors step into a cab. The resentment, Voss admitted, was never really about Marchetti as a person. It was about what she represented, a shortcut through a system Voss had spent her whole life believing only rewarded relentless work. "It wasn't fair of me," Voss said candidly. "She didn't choose her parents. But I looked at her, and I saw every year I spent underpaid and overlooked, and I let that poison how I saw her." The tension crystallized publicly, if quietly, at an awards ceremony where Marchetti won a prize many industry insiders felt should have gone to Voss for a far more demanding performance. Voss smiled for the cameras, congratulated her rival warmly backstage, and went home, by her own admission, furious. She never said Marchetti's name in an interview for years afterward. When asked to name promising young actresses, she'd list others, always others, and the omission became its own kind of statement that industry insiders quietly noticed. Marchetti, for her part, has always spoken of Voss with careful reverence. "She's the greatest there's ever been," she said in an early interview. "I only hope to be a fraction of what she is." Whether that admiration was genuine or self-protective diplomacy, Voss says she still doesn't entirely know. What she does know is that the frost between them never fully thawed. "I've made peace with what I felt," Voss said. "I haven't made peace with the fact that I felt it at all." The final name Eleanor Voss offered wasn't the product of a single explosive incident, like Victor Amato, or the accumulation of resentment, like Isla Marchetti. It was, in her words, the quietest tragedy of the six, a collaboration that should have been extraordinary and instead became a masterclass in mutual incompatibility. Julian Ashworth was, like Voss, a classically trained performer with a reputation for precision and control. On paper, they were mirror images of each other, two intellectual, disciplined actors who approached character with the seriousness of scholars. Critics and studios alike assumed their eventual pairing, in the period drama The Glass House, would be one of the defining collaborations of both their careers. Instead, according to Voss, it revealed just how differently two disciplined actors could interpret discipline itself. Voss builds a character from emotional truth outward. She wants to feel a scene in her body before she ever worries about how it looks. Ashworth worked in the opposite direction, sculpting a performance externally first, refining gesture and cadence like a composer arranging notes, letting emotion follow form rather than precede it. The clash came to a head during a rehearsal for one of the film's most demanding scenes. Voss had spent days working on an accent and speech pattern meant to reflect her character's fractured history. Ashworth, watching her work through it, reportedly said, "It's very precise. Do you think the audience will care more about the vowels than the feeling?" It was, by all accounts, not meant as cruelty. Ashworth has said as much in the years since. But to Voss, it landed as a dismissal of the entire foundation of her process, an echo of criticism she'd heard from other collaborators over the decades and never stopped feeling the sting of. "Some people mistake stillness for depth," she said in the documentary, without naming him directly. "Restraint is not automatically truth. Sometimes it's just distance with better lighting." The film was, once again, a critical success, praise for the charged restraint between its two leads. Voss and Ashworth have never spoken about it as chemistry. They've spoken about it, separately, as two people standing in the same scene while living in entirely different worlds. They were never cast together again, and both, by all accounts, have been quietly relieved about it ever since. 6 names. 6 stories. Decades of silence, replaced in a single afternoon by the kind of honesty Eleanor Voss had spent her entire career avoiding. None of these stories, notably, ended in public feuds or headline-grabbing scandal. That was never her way. Instead, they lived quietly inside her, shaping which roles she took, which actors she refused to work with again, which names she left out of interviews without anyone quite noticing. What made the documentary interview so striking wasn't scandal for its own sake. It was the rare sight of a woman famous for control finally admitting that control had a cost, that decades of composure had been built, in part, on grudges she never let herself release. "I used to think my job was to make it look easy," Voss said near the end of the interview. "To never let anyone see what a scene actually took from me. I'm not sure that was honesty. I think it might have just been very good acting." At 76, Eleanor Voss finally let the performance drop, if only for 90 minutes, and only because, as she put it, she'd simply run out of reasons to keep pretending. This has been a work of fiction. Eleanor Voss, Marcus Bellamy, Teddy Okafor, Roland Kessler, Victor Amato, Islam Marchetti, and Julian Ashworth are invented characters, and this story does not depict any real actor, film, or event.